obviously people began to go to these people. Slowly, slowly, they taught others. And they taught their students. So obviously Abdullah, Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, Imam Shafi, Imam Muhammad, and Imam Malik, they were the students of the likes of these people that I just mentioned. And eventually what happened is that because these people had actually seen a walking, talking Islam, the entire culture of Islam still alive, there were more of these people who could actually understand the true spirit of the deen. But obviously, as with every subsequent generation, the light of prophethood is dimming, and there is less proficiency. And thus, eventually what you had is you had a lot less people who are as proficient as these masters. But eventually what happened is that there were 4 people, after the 3rd and 4th century, there were 4 people that literally everybody agreed upon that these are the 4 traditions that we will take from. Because these traditions, they proliferated. They spread far and wide. Maybe, and this was Abu Hanifa's tradition, this was Shafi'i, Malik, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal's traditions. Right? They spread far and wide. Why? Because they codified a system. They collected the rulings together and presented it in a codified way. They had enough students. It was a natural selection by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was by design, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bringing people closer to them. Right? To these people more than others. Because if you look at it, though we only know 4 madhabs as such, although there's a 5th madhab today, and I'm sure there's a 6th and 7th one as well today, right? Contemporary madhahib, modernists and progressives and so on and so forth. But in terms of traditional madhahib, we see 4 that have actually stood the test of time, right? Have a historicity attached to it. There were others, but they didn't live. They lived maybe some didn't even live for a century. Some lived for the 1st generation, and then there weren't enough students to continue it. Because let's just say that I've got all of these bright ideas, and I teach about 20 people, and they are very enlightened. Now these 20 people, they become very enlightened by that, but they don't feel it's good enough to pass on to anybody else, and they go and they start doing something else. Whatever I've taught is going to disappear. Do you know what I'm saying? Whatever I've taught is going to disappear. So now, I was told that the adhan wasn't going to be played, so that's why I carried on. But anyway, it's like, let's just say somebody writes something great and puts a book out. But that book sells for the 1,000 print run, and then after that it's never printed again. Right? It's remaindered, it's gone. That's it, that heritage is finished. But at the end of the day, it's the acceptance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The acceptance that comes from Allah, the qubuliyah that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for these madhahib, right? That it was only these 4 that continued and that stood the test of time and were actually developed further and have come as they are. Because if you look, you had a school of Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri. Right? Sharik ibn Abdullah al-Nakhai. Nakhai had a school, he was teaching people. Right? You had Abu Sulaiman Dawood al-Zahiri. In fact, his school actually lasted a while longer until that eventually died out as well. That was a literalist school, where they would look at everything in a very veridical, very verbatim way. Right? Like for example, one opinion that's mentioned from them is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that La tabulu, do not urinate in still water. Do not urinate in still water. Now obviously, still water, the reason you don't urinate in there is because it pollutes it and others can't use it then, because it's still water and the impurity won't flow away. So it doesn't have a sense of self-purification, all right? What some of the Zahiris said is that because the Prophet ﷺ said you can't urinate in there, it's prohibited. But you can defecate in there because he didn't say you can't defecate. So you can see the literalism that went into their perspective. And obviously that couldn't remain because it was too black and white. It didn't have any color to it, right? And the problem is that there is a neo-Zahirism today, which is that people are trying to return to Zahirism to a literal kind of outlook, right? And trying to just basically disqualify all of the heritage that we have from before. So anyway, you had Dawud al-Zahiri, you had Abu Abdurrahman ibn Muhammad al-Awza'i, very famous. Awza'i was very famous, and his discussions with some of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa as well. Then there was Muhammad ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Layla. Now there were others as well, but these are some of the prominent ones who had schools, but they weren't very enduring. They didn't last for too long. The students maybe didn't have enough students, or enough proficient students, or enough famous students. Now, why did the other madhabs become so proliferated? Like if you look at it today, probably half of the madhab following world is Hanafi. Right? Because if you look at just China alone, the 40 million, or according to some research, 100 million Muslims there are all Hanafi. Right? You look at, massive in India, Pakistan, for the majority of except the southern area is Shafi'i. Right? Sri Lanka is Shafi'i as well. Right? Syria, you look at the whole Bosnia, you look at a number of the USSR, the previous pre-USSR states, and so on and so forth. Right? Iran and other places. The second most prolific is the Malikis, not the Shafi'is, right? It's actually the Maliki. The whole of North Africa is supposed to be Maliki, except that unfortunately there are people that have basically moved on to some other ideologies recently in places like Algeria and others, right? Then you've got the Shafi'is, and then you've got the Hanbalis. The Hanbalis are a very small group today, right? The Hanbalis are a very small group today. The focus of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and his proficiency was more in hadith, according to many of the scholars. And that's what he wrote more on in terms of fiqh. That's why they say that his madhab as such wasn't as strong in terms of its endurance. A great madhab. I mean, Imam Ahmad, you can't, you just can't put anybody, equal with him in terms of his proficiency and his zuhud and everything. I mean, he's an imam. I mean, if you can have a few imams among our history, he's one of the imams, not just in fiqh, but in hadith and in everything else. But when we're looking at it purely from a juridical point of view, then that's what we get. Eventually, it just became normal and the practice that everybody who learnt fiqh, learnt it under one of the schools, right? Until about 200 years ago, about 150 years ago. When when it slowly began that we don't need the four madhabs. I don't entertain conspiracy theories. I'm not saying it's a British thing, as some people like to say, right? Wallahu a'lam what the reason was for that. But the fact is there, that it's only about 150 to 200 years old. Because, I'll tell you something, let's take a survey, right? This is something I want you to do. Just give me the names of 5 scholars, quickly, right? Volunteer some names of prominent scholars who most of us will know about. We've heard their name, right? That are beyond 200 years. Throw me some names. Sorry? Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, alhamdulillah. That's one. Another one? Imam Suyuti. Right? So I'll write him down. Ibn Taymiyyah, Suyuti. Who else? Ghazali. Okay, carry on. Bin Baz is recent. Rahimahullah. Sorry? See, that's the problem. Some people they don't even know beyond 200 years. No offense to whoever said it, but I'm saying over 200 years. Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd and Ibn Hajar. You want one more for Barakah? Ibn Hajar, who? Imam Nawawi, you can't miss him, right? MashaAllah, we've got a lot of Shafi'is here. Anyway, let's look at these, right? Ibn Taymiyyah, the first one, Rahimahullah, Shaykhul Islam. He was a Hanbali. Right? He never said, don't become a Hanbali. He was a Hanbali. In fact, my current professor, Abdul Hakim al-Matrudi, he speaks about the influence of Ibn Taymiyyah and the Hanbali school. His entire thesis was on that subject, of whether, what affected what. His whole discussion is about that. Yes, there's no doubt that many of these scholars that you've mentioned had opinions that went against their madhab, because they had the level of ijtihad. They had the level of this proficiency in qualification to infer their own rulings. And they did go against in some issues from their madhab. But they were still, you could call them either affiliated mujtahids, right? Or mujtahids within the madhab. But they were primarily Hanbali. In fact, if you look at Ibn Taymiyyah, his father and grandfather were all great scholars of the Hanbali school. Right? And they've written text on that subject. So Ibn Taymiyyah was a Hanbali, there's no doubt about that. Yes, he had divergent opinions and he had tafarrudat, and he has the absolute right for that. Just like Tahawi has for the Hanafi school as well. But as a Hanafi, I can't follow Tahawi's opinion, because he doesn't represent the school in his isolated opinion, in his personal opinion. I have to follow the school, right? Number one, Suyuti. Suyuti is no doubt he's a Shafi'i scholar, right? Well within the Shafi'i school. Ghazali, primarily Shafi'i. Although he did have opinions, if you look at his Bidayatul Hidayah, if you look at his Ihya, if you look at some of the other books of fiqh, he is kind of ambiguous in some of his fiqh in terms of the ruling. For example, I mean, he's with the Hanafis when it comes to raising the hands up to the ears, right? But in some of his books, he mentions up to the shoulders. Right? But he was a Shafi'i, there's no doubt, because he wrote in the usul of the Shafi'i school. So he was a legist of the Shafi'i school as well, usuli. Ibn Rushd was a Maliki for the most part. Though, he was a philosopher when it came to, he was a very Aristotelian ideology, a refiner of the Aristotelian ideology. But he was definitely a Maliki. Okay. And then Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, you can't get a bigger Shafi'i than him. Right? Alhamdulillah. And Nawawi, again, another massive Shafi'i scholar. Right, of colossal terms, absolutely, right, all of these. So you'd be hard pressed to find a single scholar from before 200 years ago that didn't affiliate themselves to the madhab unless they were a Zahiri. Unless they were Zahiri. Yeah. Imam Shawkani is recent. He's from Yemen. Imam Shawkani is recent. Imam Shawkani started off with something maybe from the Zaydi background. Right, which is Zaydi Hanafi, maybe, I'm not really sure. And then after that, I think he was a mujtahid in his own right or something. I'm not sure, right? But he's recent. So you can't permit, there was something accepted upon. In fact, you had one of the Hanbali scholars, I think it's either Ibn Qudam, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, one of the two. They wrote, الرد على من لم يتبع المذاهب الأربعة. That a repudiation of those who don't follow one of the four madhabs. Right? I'm going to have to stop here because it is Salat time. There's a lot more to be said, but hopefully you've got an understanding of how these things developed. And finally, for a mujtahid, it's not in, I just want to say this one last point because I find that it's so important. If somebody has the entire corpus of ahadith, which were maybe not even available to all the imams, for example, right? He's got all the hadith, he's got a best database, he's got a very, very good computer system, and all the rest of it, right? And he's got the ability to correlate and to show the correspondence and everything. Do you think that he can provide a good madhab? If he was given all the resource and everything, the reason he won't be able to is because there's no living tradition today that will show you how these rules were manifested and were practiced. What the four imams had is they still had communities around the world, wherever they were, they still had Sahaba, Tabi'een and others who still showed what it was like to be in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Today you can't point out one single area where it's exactly like that, where you can be reading your hadith and look there and think, oh, and now I understand what that is. I'm telling you, when we're studying even lugha, when we're studying lexicography, when we're studying even fiqh and hadith, you don't understand what you're reading until you actually go somewhere in the world and you actually see, oh, now I understand what that was talking about. It is not a simple endeavor, I'm telling you. That's why madhab, for a mujtahid mutlaq, an independent mujtahid to come about the likes of that, though someone might be intelligent enough, there's just not maybe enough other things. There's no, obviously the tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a whole different thing. It's not enough for us to get that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. The reason I just wanted to continue this for a few more moments. If we can get the sisters to also settle down, inshallah, just for the next 10-15 minutes. Jazakallah khairan. I think that it was actually very important for us to come back and for me to actually round this off, finish it up, because what we covered so far was purely from a very historical level, and I think we need to really tie in and understand the whole concept of unity of the ummah with it, and I think that's extremely important. There are also some very frequently asked questions with regards to this issue, common misconceptions, common confusions and misunderstandings, which I'm sure will come up in the question and answers, and I want to preempt them by trying to cover some of them right now. Right? These are certain questions that bother many of us and will basically taint our perspective as such and our understanding of what has been said so far. So I think they need to be clarified. I just want to mention one or two things. Why did, for example, the Hanafi school proliferate so greatly? 50% of the ummah maybe, right? I mean, these are, this is not any kind of personal statistics that I've conducted, but this is according to what some of the ulama have mentioned, just a basic survey of the Muslim lands. One of the reasons just could be that people like Imam Abu Yusuf, right, was made the Qadi al-Qudat, the supreme judge, the judge of all judges under Harun al-Rashid, one of the greatest caliphs of the Abbasid Caliphate, right? And obviously that must have had some influence because he wrote his Kitab al-Kharaj and some other books for Harun al-Rashid. Then you had, for example, the Uthmanis, the Uthmani Turks, it was probably one of the longest ruling dynasties ever to have lived and ever to have come and gone, about 600 or 700 years, and they were primarily Hanafi as well. Not that they ever enforced it. It wasn't like that's the only thing that could function under their rule. But obviously, when you've got the supreme authority doing something in a particular way, people normally follow suit. That's why the constitutions of Egypt today was based on the Hanafi school. Obviously, it's been modernized, and there's a number of other issues that have crept in there, from the new Azhar, as such. So there are a number of reasons. Obviously, there are a number of reasons if you want to go into it, from a geopolitical perspective. But anyway, that's not what we want to do today. What I'm looking at is that's the fact of the matter, and that's what happened. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted in a particular way. Some provide this as a wisdom, that one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had 4 madhabs as such proliferate is so that everything that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever did, right? Because there were some things that he did earlier on and then they stopped doing it. Right? For example, there's a hadith which talks about raising the hands in the prayer at every single movement. Before sajda, after the sajda, between the two sajdas. You can find these hadith in Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar of Tahawi. Right? And then you have some hadith which speak about just doing it at the beginning and before and after ruku. And then you have some hadith like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud relates that he only did it in the beginning and never did it again. So now what happened? Some have shown a chronology of events of saying that initially it was before it was a part of every single movement, and then it was reduced when finally there was more sukoon in the prayer, because initially you could even speak in prayer. If you came in, you could ask the guy what rakat is the imam on, right? You could move in the prayer before, but all of these things became a lot more tight as the people became more used to it, right? And these things became abrogated, mansukh. Now, for the Shafis, they took it at the middle, where they said, okay, before ruku and after ruku, we're going to do that. Likewise, the Hanbalis. Whereas the Hanafis said no. Hanafis and Malikis said no. We're going to take the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, where we're going to take the first one. But anyway, just a few of the other issues I'd like to just preempt, as I mentioned. The whole call today that you don't need to follow a madhab, right? There are 2 groups primarily. There's the variation between, but there are 2 types of calls towards no madhab, right? One say that let's disown everything in between, go back to the Quran and Sunnah and take it literally, right? That's one approach. The second approach is they're better with the madhabs. They said we can benefit from all of them, but we need to reinterpret the entire Sharia according to contemporary times. So we need a reinterpretation. We need a modernization of faith, right? Now you can see the problem with both of these, because one is completely rejecting, this many centuries of scholarship. And the other ones, again, are rejecting it indirectly by saying we need to reinterpret, thinking that it's not applicable. No doubt there are certain issues that can be further developed. There's no doubt about that. But if you go back to the first approach, many people who call to that first approach, that disregard everything, don't go with the Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki and Hanbali, what's this all about? And look at the Quran and Sunnah yourself. Now let's just say that I say, okay, fine, away with all of these madhabs. Let me go directly to the Quran and Sunnah. And I'm looking for a particular issue. And I look at Bukhari and Muslim and so on and so forth, and I come up with my own opinion based on what I read. But it goes against what, for example, Fadilat al-Shaykh Abdul Aziz bin Baz said, or what Shaykh al-Albani said, or for example what Shaykh al-Uthaymeen said, or anybody else, for instance, rahimahumullah. Right? If I come up with my own ijtihad and my own Quran and Sunnah understanding, and I come up with an opinion, they're still going to reject what I'm saying. Basically, the call is towards the 5th madhab. It's not the fact that reject the 4 and do it yourself, because nobody can do it themselves except the mujtahid. And we'll talk about a mujtahid later. It's a call towards the 5th madhab. It's a call towards a fifth madhab. And it's a contemporary madhab. But the question is, why should I give away my Rolls Royce for I don't want to say a Mini Cooper because they're quite nice, right? But you know what I'm saying. Something that was a lot closer to the time of the Sahaba, tried and tested, 1400 years of experience. And I want to leave that to follow something that's in its first generation. That's in its first generation. That you have to understand that. That's the crux of the matter here. The idea is not that everybody individualize their faith by doing their own ijtihad. Nobody agrees with that. Because you'd have, and as we do have in certain places, we have about 50 different perspectives. Number two, they say that madhahib, this is a part of the heresy of the ummah. Right? This is not the firqatul najiyah. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Dawud and others, it mentions about this firqah that there will only be one sect that will be the saved sect and all of the other 73 will go to hell. That is obviously talking about aqidah. That is not the ikhtilaf in the furu'. It's not the ikhtilaf in the branches of faith like the jurisprudence. That is clearly in aqidah when you're talking about the Hanafis, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you're talking about the Mu'tazila, the various group under the Mu'tazila. I mean, people like Shahrastani and Abdul Qahir al-Baghdadi and many of these others, they've already, in their time, according to their understanding, they've already enumerated these 73 sects. But obviously that's an ongoing thing. Nobody can decide exactly who these sects were because what level the Prophet ﷺ talked about this at, what intensity of the sect and so on. But basically there's clearly the different sects of the Shia, the different sects of the Khawarij, the Mu'tazila, the Murji'ah, the Qadariyah, the Jabariyah, and so on and so forth. It's talking about a difference of opinion on a polemical aqidah, theological level. Right? It's not talking about the furu, because the four imams did not differ in terms of the fundamental aspects of aqidah. They all agreed upon. They will never condemn each other for that reason. Okay, that's another one. The other thing is that there is an adab between the madhahib. When do you see a Shafi like just bashing a Maliki and putting him down? In fact, the great ulama of each of the school never allowed that to happen. Yes, as an academic discourse they allowed it. For example, in front of one of the great scholars of India, Rashid, I think it was, I forget, maybe it was Maulana Rashid Ahmed Gangohi or somebody else. He must have really explained the matter and really broken down the dalils of the Shafi'i school, right, on a particular issue. One of his students got up, in this great sense of emotion after hearing his teacher's breakdown, academic breakdown of the point of view in the Shafi'i school, and he said, if Imam Shafi'i was here today, he would have even listened to you. You get a few people like that, who say that Imam, when Masih Isa alayhi salatu wasalam will come, he will be Hanafi. You got a few people like that who claim that, who absolutely are convinced that that's going to be the fact, right? But that's not the way to do this. That's not the way to do this. What did the Shaykh say? Despite the fact that, he was breaking down the opinion of the Shafi'i school, when he heard his students say, he said that, he really put the guy down. He said, don't you understand that if Imam Shafi'i was even here, you think I would have even spoken? Do you think I would have even spoken? Right? So that's the adab they had for each of their ijtihad, because the whole adab was رَأْيي صَحِيح يَحْتَمِلُ الْخَطَأ وَرَأْيُكَ خَطَأ يَحْتَمِلُ الصَّوَابِ. Because it's a matter of, we don't know what the clear-cut truth is according to Allah, because you can't go and ask Allah. What we're told though, according to the hadith, Bukhari, Muslim and other narrators, when a mujtahid does his ijtihad, what does ijtihad mean? Ijtihad is a qualified person who has access to the sources, who has all of the prerequisite knowledge and information, and all of the ulum and the sciences, and then he looks at the Quran and Sunnah to derive a ruling that is not already legislated upon. That's what a mujtahid is supposed to do, to exercise this endeavor. So what the hadith says is that when a mujtahid does that, and he is able to reach the truth, that is the truth according to Allah, he won't know, but he will think it's the truth, obviously. Because you don't know what exactly Allah has according, what is the truth according to Allah, right? But we have to assume we know, right? When he reaches that truth, and if it corresponds with the truth according to Allah, he will get 2 rewards. And if it doesn't, then because he did what he was told to do in the Sharia, he will get 1 reward, even if he's absolutely wrong. For example, let's just say there's a very difficult divorce issue, where the husband said certain things and whatever, the wife is saying no. One mufti says it's a divorce, another one said it's not a divorce. Obviously, it can only be one thing. You can't have a couple that are married and not married, there's no hal in between the two. There's no intermediate, there's no intermediate position in between the two. There has to be one of them is right. But each mufti is insisting, right, based on his ijtihad. They're both valid ijtihads, but which one is more correct? Only one is more correct according to Allah. According to the usulis, only one is correct according to Allah. Right? We won't know that, but we have to assume that whatever we're following is more correct. So as a Shafi'i, I have to think that whatever I'm following is more correct, but it has the possibility of being wrong. And what you're following as a Hanafi or a Maliki is wrong, but has the possibility of being correct. And there's ulama like Anwar Shah Kashmiri and others, rahimahullah, they've even discussed whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal on the Day of Judgment who was more correct on any given issue. And he said, I don't think so, because every mujtahid did what they were supposed to do, which was to make the ijtihad, and people followed them. If you were born in a Hanafi school, in a Hanafi household, you don't have to stick to the Hanafi school. You can become a Shafi'i. If you were born in a Shafi'i background, you don't have to stick to that. You can become a Hanafi, but you don't change every week. You change once. You change according to what's accessible to you, right? The background on this is what is accessible. Have you got books? Have you got ulama that you can access? I remember once I went to a program, a retreat, and one brother I know is absolutely he's from Hyderabad or from Pakistan, right? Typical Hanafi brother, and he's doing Raf'ul Yadayn. And he's traditional. I mean, I knew that he follows a madhab, right? But he's doing Raf'ul Yadayn. I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I'm a Maliki now, right? He's from Philadelphia. And I said, but why are you raising your hands for? He says, well, for him, poor guy, he wants to become a Maliki because he's studying under Sheikh Khalid Blankenship, right? Dr. Khalid Blankenship, I think, or whatever. But he hasn't studied the Salat enough to understand that the Malikis also don't raise their hands. He thinks just doing what my dad doesn't do is Maliki. You know what I'm saying? Just something different. I want to be different. Wallahu alam. Right? Obviously it looked really stupid, didn't it? But what I'm trying to say is that that's not the point. The point is that you go and you take a madhab that you have access to. Because it's all about following the deen, following the Quran and Sunnah, following the Prophet ﷺ through someone who's already done the work for you, because we just can't do it ourselves. Because we don't have the requisites of or the qualifications of ijtihad and so on. Okay, so that's the adab. There needs to be an adab. And yes, there may be a few instances in our history where people have fought, right? A few zealots got up and they began to fight with each other. But for the most part, and even today, if I see a Maliki brother, I'm more than happy to see him. And I learn from him. I just love it, because I go, what do you guys say about this? What do you guys say about this? It really improves your understanding of the legal system of Islam. Okay, another one is, one thing you have to remember is that the Hanafi madhab, as opposed to the Shafi'i, Maliki and Hanbali madhab, was not a single man endeavor. And neither was it just 3 muftis either. It was an entire group of 40 experts in the various different fields, including, people from all the way from spirituality to lugha, to lexicography, to hadith and everybody else. Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani, Zakaria ibn Abi Zaida, and, all to the likes of Fudayl ibn Iyad and Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. So it was a group effort. In fact, it says that for 3 months sometimes they would debate on an issue. And they couldn't reach a conclusion. And finally, after 3 months, it would be written, Qala Abu Hanifa this, and Qala Abu Yusuf and Muhammad this. And that's how it go down. That's how we've inherited it. Now, the flexibility that gives the muftis of today, that they can actually pick and choose within their own madhab, according to certain parameters, obviously. But it gives a great flexibility. Another thing was, Imam Abu Hanifa was a tabi'i. Right? I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about why I'm a Hanafi or whatever, but these are just certain points, okay? I'm not saying the Hanafis are better than the Shafis or whatever, all right? Although I do believe that as a Hanafi, I have to think that whatever we're doing is the best opinion, okay? Is the most valid opinion. Another thing that comes up that's been going around is that the Imam said, and it's quoted from them, that, if you see a hadith that's sahih, then reject my qawl, reject my opinion, and take what's sahih. Then how do you deal with that issue? Well, the thing is that you have to remember, these imams were not idiots. They weren't talking to Tom, Dick and Harry. They were talking to muhaddithin. They were talking to their students. How many minutes? Okay. They were talking to their students who were muhaddithin, that obviously if there's some other hadith that you come across, you can reject what I'm saying because our understanding was based on this. He wasn't talking to just anybody off the street who finds a hadith somewhere and says, oh, Imam Abu Hanifa didn't see this. How do you know he didn't see that? Do you know? So it's very difficult for you to determine that he didn't see something. You can maybe establish what he did see, but you can't establish what he did not see and say that because he didn't see that, you know, because that process of elimination is just impossible to do, right? We're not privy to his life at that time. Or for any other imam for that matter. So you have to remember this statement is to the muhaddithin. And number three, when he talks about weak ahadith, you have to remember that a hadith that's weak today was not necessarily weak when the imams had it. Because you know, if you look at it, Imam Abu Hanifa passed away in 150 Hijri. Imam Malik passed away in 179. Imam Shafi in 204 and Imam Ahmad in 241. Imam Bukhari passed away after that in 256. He was only born in 194. So when Imam Bukhari got the hadith, there may have been now a narrator who came in after Imam Abu Hanifa's time, who was a weak narrator and the hadith happened to only be narrated from him. Now Imam Bukhari couldn't take that hadith anymore. Whereas earlier on, before that time, it was sahih because all of the narrators were sahih. I mean, I should spend more time in explaining this, but we don't have the time. But I hope you understand what I'm saying. That in the first 3 generations or 4 generations, everybody was completely upright, reliable. But then a 5th narrator, and the time comes of Tirmidhi or Abu Dawud or whatever, that person is weak, although the 4 are at the top. Imam Abu Hanifa has taken it from the 4th one or the 3rd one, right? So for him it's sahih, but later that hadith becomes weak maybe, right? That's a possibility as well. So, you know, we mustn't take this in black and white. You must understand that this is a very intricate system, okay? And you know, I don't want to go into much more detail here, but you have to remember Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he says himself, and Suyuti relates this from him in Tadrib al-Rawi, right? And his practice shows this as well. He says that when it comes to aqeedah, or when it comes to fiqh, then we really like go down on the hadith and scrutinize it. When it comes to fadail, we take a step back. If you look at Imam Bukhari, it's only in his sahih, right, his al-Jami' al-Sahih, that he's taken up this criteria to only include what's sahih according to him. If you look at his Juz' al-Qira'ah khalf al-Imam, Juz' al-Fatiha, and his al-Adab al-Mufrad, it's full of da'if hadith. Full of them. So if it's okay for him, why isn't it okay for us? What's the point of somebody coming and taking Imam al-Tirmidhi's book and making a sahih Sunan al-Tirmidhi? And taking out what he thinks is weak and making, this is what I think is the Sahih of At-Tirmidhi or Sahih of Ibn Majah, right? What's the point of that? If it was good for those imams, why not for us, right? So these are just some of the things, but one thing I must tell you and I must encourage is that this is not a point of argument. It's an academic difference, and this is something that they have agreed to disagree on, and it enriches the faith to a certain degree, right? As long as your issues are not in aqeedah, that's a problem, right? When it comes to fiqh, let them do that, let them do this, right? You've got a lot of ignorance all around the world. If you've got somebody in a typical masjid in India or Pakistan, he says Ameen aloud, I'm telling you, they will turn around and say, Wahhabi, go and kill him or something like that, right? Because they've never just seen it before. But in England and in London, especially where we stay, we've got a number of issues. That's why whenever I spoke in America about any fiqh, I would say, some say this, but this is the one I follow. I even stopped saying this is Hanbali or Shafi'i, because that just confused some people, because people are so far away. They've come from under a system, but they don't really know what system it is. And you don't want them to feel that they've been doing wrong all their life, if they've been following a good system. That's why what I would normally say is that this is one opinion. Other ulama have said this. I prefer this one for this reason. So at least they feel that, you know, we're following qualified scholarship, but, you know, I could move over if I want because this seems better, because he's convincing us of, you know, what the reason is, right? So don't ever argue with others about it. It's a futile argument. We've got a lot of major things to think about and to deal with from outside our faith tradition. That's why you might be thinking, well, why the point of this? The point of this is that we got a problem. Right? We have a problem. And hopefully from more knowledge of really what happened in history and the reason why these things happened, right, will give us more tolerance, will give us a higher standing in terms of an academic nature, so that we can start looking at things more professionally as opposed to more culturally, right? Or in a more biased way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq. Let's not go around taking people out of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, whether it comes from a Hanafi, Shafi or somebody else, it doesn't matter. Let us just focus on the true things that we have, and let us try to at least come together on a brotherly level, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq. Jazakallah khairan a lot for your patience, but I thought that if we left the historical aspect only, you know, it would have not really finished it off properly for us. Thanks a lot, Jazakallah khair, for your patience and your sabr. Allah reward you for that. Wa bashiri sabirin. Jazakallah khair. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.